the last man standing. The alarm screamed through the cockpit of the Wandering Star, and Captain Jiho Kim knew he was going to die. Red lights flashed across every screen as the small cargo freighter shook violently. The hyperspace jump had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong. Something had torn through the ship's navigation system during the transition between stars, and now Jiho was somewhere he shouldn't be, with a ship that was falling apart around him. "Computer, damage report," Jiho said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. The artificial intelligence's calm voice responded over the chaos. "Hull breach in Section 7. Life support failing. Navigation offline. Emergency power at 40% and dropping. Recommendation: immediate cryosleep, while automated systems search for nearest habitable world." Jiho's hands moved across the controls, trying to stabilize the ship, but it was useless. Sparks flew from a panel to his left, and the gravity flickered, making his stomach lurch. He was a cargo pilot, not a miracle worker. The ship had maybe an hour of breathable air left, and he was light years from any known human colony. "Fine," he said, unbuckling from his seat. "Initiate emergency cryosleep. Find me somewhere to land this thing." Acknowledged. Sleep pod prepared. Scanning for habitable worlds within range. Jiho pulled himself through the tilting corridor to the small medical bay where the emergency cryopod waited. It was a coffin-sized tube that would freeze him in time, keeping him alive while the ship's computer searched for rescue. He'd never used it before. Most pilots went their whole careers without needing it. He climbed inside, and the lid sealed over him with a hiss. The last thing he saw was the countdown on the small screen, 60 seconds until freeze. Then the drugs hit his system, and the world went dark. Jiho dreamed of Earth. He dreamed of his mother's kitchen in Seoul, the smell of kimchi and rice, the sound of rain on the windows. He dreamed of the space academy of his first flight, of the endless black between stars. The dream stretched on forever, or maybe just a moment. In cryosleep, time had no meaning. When he woke, everything hurt. The cryopod lid opened with a groan of protesting metal, and warm air rushed in. Jiho gasped, his lungs burning, his muscles weak and shaking. The medical system had pumped him full of revival drugs, but waking from cryo was never pleasant. He felt like he'd been dead and someone had rudely dragged him back to life. "Computer," he croaked. "Status. Cryo-sleep duration, 47 days. Current location, surface of planet designated Velith Prime. Crash landing executed with minimal additional damage. Atmosphere breathable. Temperature acceptable. Local civilization detected. Hull integrity compromised but stable. 47 days. Jiho sat up slowly, his head spinning. Almost 2 months frozen while his ship drifted through space looking for somewhere safe. He was lucky to be alive. The ship had definitely crashed. Everything was tilted at an angle, and he could hear the groan of stressed metal. Jiho pulled on his flight suit and made his way to the airlock. Through the small window, he could see dirt and strange purple vegetation, and lights in the distance. Lots of lights. Someone knew he was here. Jiho opened the outer door and the alien air hit him. It smelled strange, like copper and flowers, but it was breathable. He stepped out onto soil that crunched under his boots and looked around at a world he'd never seen before. The Wandering Star had carved a long trench through what looked like farmland. In the distance a city rose up, all flowing organic architecture and soft lights. And between him and the city, a crowd was gathering. They arrived in vehicles that floated silently above the ground, dozens of them, and they came on foot. Hundreds of figures moving toward his crashed ship. Jiho's hand instinctively went to his side, but he'd never carried a weapon. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier. The aliens were humanoid, which was strange enough. Jiho had seen plenty of intelligent species that looked nothing like humans. But these beings had 2 arms, 2 legs, a recognizable face. Their skin had a faint glow to it, patterns of light that shifted and moved like living tattoos. They were beautiful and alien and completely surrounding him. And every single one of Them was staring at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. A group approached from the front, clearly officials of some kind. They wore uniforms marked with symbols Jiho couldn't read. The one in front held up a device and spoke, and after a moment, the device translated her words into Korean. "You are male," she said, and her voice shook. "You are a living, functioning male. How is this possible?" Jiho blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The alien stepped closer, and he could see tears streaming down her face, making the light patterns on her skin pulse erratically. "My name is High Coordinator Nari. I speak for the people of Havenport Settlement. Please, you must tell us, how do you exist?" Around them, the crowd was pressing closer. Jiho could hear sounds he couldn't identify, gasps and cries and something that might have been sobbing. Security forces were trying to hold people back, but the crowd kept growing. "I don't understand," Jiho said. "I'm human. My ship crashed. I need help repairing it." Nari looked at him with an expression of desperate hope mixed with something darker. 105 years ago, a plague swept through our people. We call it the Silence. It killed every male of our species. Every single one. The last Velith man died 95 years before you fell from the sky. The words didn't make sense at first. Jiho looked around at the crowd, really looked, and realized what he was seeing. The officials, the security forces, the hundreds of citizens watching him. All female, every single one. "What?" he whispered. "We have survived through artificial reproduction," Nari continued, her voice breaking, "through cloning and genetic manipulation. But we are dying. Our genetic diversity collapses more each generation. Our civilization is ending in slow motion. And then you crashed here, a male, alive, real." She reached out as if to touch him, then stopped herself. "Do you understand what you represent? You are proof that males can still exist in the universe. After a century of loss, you are hope itself." The crowd surged forward, and security struggled to hold them back. Jiho heard screaming, crying, shouting in the alien language. The sound washed over him like a wave, and he understood with sudden, terrifying clarity. He wasn't a crashed pilot anymore. He was a miracle, a symbol, a solution to extinction, and he had no idea how to handle that. "Please," Nari said. And now she was definitely crying. "Please, will you help us? Will you let us study you? Let us understand how you survived when our males could not?" Jiho looked at this alien woman, at the desperate hope in her eyes, at the crowd of people pressing forward just to see him. He thought about his mother back on Earth, about the simple life of hauling cargo between stations, about how all he'd wanted was to survive. But survival, he was learning, sometimes came with unexpected responsibilities. "Yes," he heard himself say, "I'll help you. But first, can someone please explain what the hell is happening?" Nari's expression transformed into something like joy, and behind her the crowd erupted in sound. Jiho had no idea what he'd just agreed to, but he suspected his life had just become a lot more complicated than a simple crashed ship. The ripple effect, the room they gave Jiho was comfortable but felt like a cage. Large windows showed the city of Havenport spread out below, all flowing architecture and soft lights. But guards stood outside his door. For his protection, they said. Jiho suspected it was also to keep him from leaving. He'd been on Velith Prime for 3 days, and the situation was getting worse by the hour. Dr. Minji arrived every morning to run tests. She was a geneticist, young and brilliant, with light patterns on her skin that shifted to blue when she was concentrating. She drew blood samples, took tissue scans, asked endless questions about human biology. She was professional and kind, but Jiho could see the desperation behind her eyes. "Your genetic structure is fascinating," she said on the 3rd morning, watching screens filled with data Jiho couldn't understand. "Humans have natural defenses against genetic attacks that our species never developed. The plague that killed our males would barely affect you. But I'm not Velith," Jiho said. "My biology can't help you bring back your men." Minji's light patterns flickered sad purple. "No, but understanding how your species survived similar threats might help us reverse the damage. It's the first real hope we've had in a century. Ambassador Hana was assigned to help Jiho understand Velith culture. She was older than Minji, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much sadness. She taught him their language, explained their history, showed him what their world had been before the silence. We had art, she said, showing him recordings of ancient performances, music that could make you cry with joy, poetry that captured the complexity of love. All of it died with our males. What we create now is just empty copies, going through motions we barely remember. Jiho watched the old recordings and saw the difference immediately. The ancient art was alive, passionate, real. The modern equivalents were technically perfect but hollow, like paintings by someone who'd never actually felt emotion. What about relationships? He asked. Hana's light patterns went dark for a moment. We form partnerships still, but they're shadows of what we once had. My mother used to tell me about my father, about how they completed each other. I never understood what she meant until he was gone. Now our partnerships are just arrangements for shared resources and companionship. The depth is missing. I'm sorry, Jiho said, and meant it. Don't be sorry, Hana replied. Just help us if you can. Though I worry about what your presence is doing to our people. She was right to worry. Outside Jiho's window, he could see the changes happening to Havenport. Crowds gathered in the streets, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent. News of his arrival had spread across the entire planet, and every day brought more Velith to the settlement, desperate for a glimpse of the alien male. Commander Yuna controlled security, and she was clearly struggling. She was tall and hard-edged, with scars on her face and light patterns that flickered aggressive red when she was stressed, which was always. We've had 47 violent incidents in 3 days, she reported to High Coordinator Nari during a meeting Jiho was required to attend. Fights over positions closer to the facility. A riot at the western checkpoint. And the black market is exploding. People are selling anything connected to Captain Kim. Hair strands, clothing fibers, even air samples from his room. Jiho felt sick. People are selling my hair? Your discarded tissue is valuable, Nari said gently. You must understand, to them you represent something they've mourned for a century. It's not rational, but loss rarely is. It's more than that, Yuna said grimly. We're seeing a psychological breakdown. Suicide rates have tripled. Work productivity is collapsing. People are abandoning their responsibilities to come here, and that's just in Havenport. Other settlements are experiencing the same thing. The political situation was even messier. Nari led what she called the preservationists, who wanted to use science to find a cure. Council member Sora led the naturalists, who believed the Velith should accept extinction with dignity rather than desperately grasping at hope through alien biology. This is unnatural, Sora argued during another meeting, her voice cold. We were meant to end. Trying to use this creature to save ourselves is an insult to the males we lost. This creature has a name, Nari snapped, and he's offering us a chance at survival. Would you really choose extinction over swallowing your pride? The arguments went on for hours. Jiho sat through meetings where officials debated his future like he wasn't there. Some wanted him to provide genetic material forcibly. Others wanted him confined and studied. A few suggested he should be worshipped as a divine sign. But the worst faction didn't attend official meetings. They came for him on the 4th night. Jiho was sleeping when rough hands grabbed him. He barely had time to shout before something was pressed over his mouth and the world went dark. When he woke, he was in a different room. Bare concrete instead of comfortable quarters. Women surrounded him, dozens of them, and their light patterns were chaotic, flickering between colors like broken signals. We're not going to hurt you, one said, but her hands were shaking. We just need you to understand. We need you to help us. The woman's name was Yunji, and she led what she called the Desperate Movement. These were Velith who had lost all hope in official channels, who believed that extreme measures were the only path to survival. They'll study you for years, Yunji said, pacing in front of where they'd tied Jiho to a chair. They'll run careful tests and debate ethics while our species dies. We don't have time for that. We need action now. What do you want from me? Jiho asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fear clawing at his throat. Your genetic material, whatever Dr. Minji needs to create a cure. We have scientists here, equipment, everything necessary. We'll take what we need and release you unharmed. That's not how science works, Jiho said. You can't just extract DNA and magically fix your plague. It takes time, research, testing. Yunji's light patterns flashed angry red. Then we'll keep you here until it works. However long it takes. The room had maybe 30 women in it, all watching him with expressions that ranged from desperate hope to something darker. Jiho realized with horror that they'd gone beyond reason. Loss had broken something fundamental in them, turned them into people who could justify anything. He was trying to think of something to say when explosions rocked the building. Security forces stormed in, led by Yuna herself. The fight was brief and brutal. Yunji's people weren't warriors, just desperate civilians, and they scattered quickly. Yuna cut Jiho's restraints and pulled him to his feet. "Are you hurt?" she demanded. "No, I'm okay." "How did you find me?" "We've been tracking the desperates for weeks. We just didn't move fast enough." Yuna's light patterns were pure black with rage. "This is my failure." Outside, Hana was waiting with a transport. She threw her arms around Jiho the moment she saw him, and he felt her shaking. "I thought we'd lost you," she whispered. "I'm fine," he said, though he didn't feel fine. "But Hana, those women, they were so desperate, so broken. What I'm doing here, it's not helping. It's making everything worse." "No," Hana said firmly. "What happened to us made things worse. Your presence is just revealing damage that was already there." Back in his quarters, Jiho couldn't sleep. He stood at the window watching Havenport, seeing the crowds that never dispersed, hearing the sounds of chaos from the streets. His arrival had triggered something in the Velith, something that might tear their civilization apart before any cure could be found. Dr. Minji arrived just after dawn, and for the first time she was smiling. "I found something," she said, pulling up data on her portable screen. 3 genetic sequences in your DNA that show resistance to the type of damage the silence causes. We can't make you compatible with Velith biology, but we might be able to adapt these sequences to create a treatment." "How long would that take?" Jiho asked. Minji's smile faded. "Years, maybe decades, and we'd need access to the Genesis archives." "What's that?" "The most advanced genetic research facility on the planet. It was built before the silence but abandoned when our males died. All the equipment is still there, dormant but functional. With those resources, we might complete the work in time to save our species." "So let's go there," Jiho said. "We can't. It's in Northcrest Colony territory, and they've already declared they intend to seize you by force. The only way to reach the archives is to cross territory claimed by multiple settlements, all of which want to capture you." Jiho looked out at the chaotic city below, then back at Minji. "But if we get there, we could cure the silence?" "Possibly. It's our best chance, then we go. We find a way." Minji's light patterns flickered uncertain yellow. "That's a death sentence. The journey alone would be incredibly dangerous." "Staying here is killing your people," Jiho said. "I can see it happening. At least if we try to reach the archives, we're moving toward a solution instead of watching everything collapse." When he told Nari his decision, she was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "I'll assemble a team. Our best people. But Captain Kim, you must understand. Once we leave Havenport, we'll be hunted by every settlement between here and the archives. Many of us probably won't survive the journey." Jiho thought about the desperate women who'd kidnapped him, about Hana's stories of her father, about a civilization slowly dying despite all their technology and intelligence. The colony's descent. The team assembled in secret over 3 days while Havenport continued its spiral into chaos. Jiho watched from his quarters as the settlement below transformed into something he barely recognized. The orderly city he'd first seen was becoming a nightmare of desperation and violence. Commander Yuna brought reports each morning, and each day they were worse. 2 more deaths last night, she said, her light patterns dark with exhaustion. A fight over someone claiming to have met you. And the Western District is completely shut down. People have stopped going to work. They just gather in the streets waiting for something. I don't even think they know what." "How long can this continue?" Jiho asked. "Not long. We're maybe a week from complete social collapse. Other settlements are experiencing the same thing. Your presence on this planet is triggering a civilization-wide breakdown." She looked at him with an expression that wasn't quite accusation, but close. "We need to either find a cure quickly or you need to leave. The middle ground is killing us." Hana arrived later with cultural records, still trying to teach Jiho about Velith civilization, but even she was distracted. Her light patterns flickered erratically, and she kept glancing at the window where crowds were visible in the distance. "Tell me about your father," Jiho said suddenly. Hana's patterns stilled. "Why?" "Because everyone talks about the silence like it's abstract. Statistics and genetic damage, but you knew someone who died. Make it real for me. She was quiet for a long time. Then she pulled out a small device and showed him an image. A Velith male stood with a young female child, both of them smiling. The male's light patterns were bright gold, happy and alive. His name was Tejan. He was a teacher, specialized in ancient literature. He loved poetry, especially the old works about love and loss. Hana's voice was soft, distant. When the silence began affecting males, he was one of the first to show symptoms. I was only 12 years old. What happened? He died slowly. First, he couldn't have children. Then his body started breaking down. The plague attacked males specifically, destroying them piece by piece. By the end, he couldn't recognize me. The disease took his mind before it took his life. She closed the image. My mother never recovered. She's alive but empty, just going through motions. That's what the silence did to all of us. It didn't just kill our males. It killed something essential in everyone who loved them. Jiho felt the weight of that loss multiplied across an entire species. Billions of Velith all carrying similar wounds. I'll help you, he said. Whatever it takes. I know, Hana replied. That's why I'm afraid. Your kindness might be what destroys you. The team that would make the journey north consisted of 6 people. Commander Yuna would lead security. Dr. Minji was essential for the scientific work. Pilot Diane would operate their transport vehicle. Engineer Hiren would maintain equipment. Hana insisted on coming as cultural liaison. And Jiho, the human male who'd become the center of everything. They left before dawn, slipping out of Haven Port while the crowd slept. The transport was a sleek vehicle that hovered silently above the ground, fast and well-armed. It would have to be. The journey to Northcrest territory covered thousands of miles across contested land. Once we cross the boundary, we're committed, Yuna said as they cleared the settlement limits. No turning back. The landscape beyond Havenport was beautiful in an alien way. Purple vegetation stretched to horizons, broken by crystalline rock formations that caught the light. Twin suns rose in the sky, one orange and one pale blue, painting everything in strange colors. Under different circumstances, Jiho would have found it amazing, but what they found in the settlements along the way drove all thoughts of beauty from his mind. The first village they passed was called Meadow Rest. It had been a farming community, providing food for larger settlements. Now it was abandoned. Buildings stood empty, fields untended. They found evidence of hasty departure, but no bodies, no signs of violence. Just an entire population that had given up and left. Where did they go? Jiho asked. Larger settlements, probably, Daeun said quietly. Looking for purpose or hope or just other people. The small communities are dying first. The second settlement was worse. It was fortified like a military base with walls and guard towers and armed patrols. When their transport approached, weapons locked onto them immediately. Yuna had to negotiate for an hour just to get permission to pass through, and even then they saw soldiers everywhere, all watching Jiho with hungry eyes. They're preparing for war, Hiren observed, stockpiling weapons and supplies. War over what? Jiho asked, though he already knew the answer. Over you, Yuna said bluntly. Settlements that get control of you get access to potential cure technology. That's worth fighting for when you're facing extinction. At the third location, they found something that made Jiho's blood run cold. It was a religious compound built around a central temple. Velith women in ceremonial robes worshipped at shrines dedicated to males. Treating the dead as divine figures, they chanted prayers for the return of masculinity, burned offerings, performed rituals that mixed grief with mysticism. When the priestesses learned a real male was passing through, they tried to keep him. Yuna had to threaten force to get them moving again. And as they left, Jiho could hear the compound's alarm sounding, calling more believers to pursue them. They've turned loss into religion, Hana said, watching the temple recede behind them. When science failed them, they turned to faith. It's sad but understandable. It's dangerous, Yuna corrected. Religious fervor can justify anything. They traveled for 5 days, moving mostly at night to avoid detection. But word of their passage spread anyway. They were attacked twice by desperate groups trying to capture Jiho, beaten back only through Yuna's tactical skill and their transport's weapons. They passed through anarchic zones where all social order had vanished, where Velith fought each other over resources and old grievances. Everywhere they went, Jiho saw the same thing, a civilization in its death throes, fragmenting and collapsing in slow motion. On the sixth night, they stopped in the ruins of what had been a major city. The buildings still stood, but they were empty, dark, lifeless. The population had simply abandoned it. This was Brightwater, Hannah said, walking through empty streets. 2 million people lived here before the silence. After the males died, the population tried to hold on, but without the social structures that males had been part of, everything fell apart. They left 50 years ago. Nobody's lived here since. Jiho explored the dead city, seeing homes with belongings still inside, offices with work left unfinished, schools with lessons on walls. It was like everyone had just stopped in the middle of their lives and walked away. "Is this the future for all Velith settlements?" he asked. "Without a cure, yes," Minji said. "The large colonies will last longest, but eventually they'll all end up like this. Empty monuments to a species that couldn't adapt to loss." That night, Hana found Jiho sitting alone on the roof of their transport, looking up at unfamiliar stars. She climbed up to join him, moving with the easy grace all Velith had. "You're very quiet tonight," she said. "I'm thinking about futility, about how I'm one person trying to save billions, about how even if we succeed, the damage might already be irreversible. You're thinking like someone who carries too much weight alone." Jiho looked at her. The alien woman's light patterns were soft blue in the darkness, peaceful and sad. Over the days they'd traveled together, he'd grown to care about her kindness and strength and the way she never gave up hope even when everything seemed hopeless. "Hana, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever feel anything? Romance, attraction, love? Or did that die with your males?" Her patterns flickered. Complex colors he'd learned meant deep emotion. "We feel echoes of it. Shadows of what our ancestors described. I've had partners, relationships that were pleasant and comfortable, but the intensity they write about in old literature, the passion and joy and pain of real love, I've never experienced that. It's like being colorblind and having people describe rainbows. I know the concept, but not the reality. That sounds lonely." "It is. We're all lonely in ways we can't quite articulate." She turned to face him. "But Jiho, since you arrived, I've felt something change. When I'm with you, there's a warmth I don't feel with other Velith. When you're in danger, I feel fear that's sharp and real, not the dull concern I usually experience. I don't know if it's because you're male or because you're you, but something about your presence is waking parts of me I didn't know were sleeping." Jiho felt his heart beat faster. "Hana, I know," she interrupted gently. "I know we're different species. I know nothing can come of this. I just needed you to know that you've given me something precious. You've let me glimpse what my mother meant when she talked about loving my father. Even if it's incomplete, even if it can't last, thank you for that." Before Jiho could respond, Hieron's voice crackled over the communicator. "Commander Yuna, we have a problem." Multiple contacts approaching from the north. Fast movers, military grade. They scrambled down from the roof. Yuna was already pulling up tactical displays, her face grim. "It's Northcrest Colony," she said. "They found us. Somehow they knew exactly where we'd be." "How?" Daeun demanded. The journey north. The Northcrest military vehicle surrounded them in the dead city, weapons armed and ready. Commander Yuna kept her gun pointed at Hieron while calculating impossible odds. 6 against maybe 30 soldiers, all of whom wanted Jiho alive. "Stand down," a voice called through speakers. "Nobody needs to die tonight. We only want the human." Yuna's light patterns flashed aggressive red. "That's not happening. Commander, be reasonable. Northcrest has the resources to actually help him." "What does your group have? A broken-down transport and desperate hope?" Jiho stepped forward before Yuna could respond. "What if I come willingly? Let my team go free?" "No," Hana said immediately. "Jiho, you can't trust them." But Hieron was nodding, her light patterns flickering relieved blue. "It's the right choice. Northcrest's Genesis archives have everything needed to create a cure. This was always where you needed to end up." "You don't get a vote," Yuna snapped at her. Then to Jiho. "They'll lock you up, use you. Take what they want without caring what it costs you." "Maybe," Jiho said. "But if it means finding a cure, isn't that worth it?" Before anyone could answer, explosions rocked the street. Not from Northcrest forces, but from somewhere else. New vehicles appeared, firing on the military units with heavy weapons. Chaos erupted as multiple factions suddenly converged on their location. "Move," Yuna screamed, dragging Jiho toward their transport. They ran through the firefight as 3 different groups battled around them. Jiho caught glimpses of religious symbols on some vehicles, anarchist markings on others. Everyone wanted him, and they were willing to kill each other to get him. Dayun got their transport moving as weapons fire sparked off its armor. Hyaran tried to follow, but a stray shot caught her in the chest. She went down hard, light patterns flickering and dying as blood pooled beneath her. "We have to go back," Jiho shouted. "She's dead," Yuna said flatly, "and she betrayed us. We keep moving." They escaped the city at maximum speed, leaving the battle behind. Jiho looked back and saw Hyaran's body lying in the street. The woman who'd thought she was saving her species, now just another casualty of its desperation. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Don't be," Yuna said, though her light patterns showed grief beneath the anger. She made her choice. We all do. They traveled through the night, taking back roads and old paths to avoid detection. But the attacks kept coming. Word had spread that the human was moving north, and every faction wanted to intercept him. They fought off raiders, evaded military patrols, and barely escaped an ambush by religious zealots. Yuna took a bad wound during one fight, an energy weapon that burned through her side. Dr. Minji patched her up, but the commander moved slower after that. Her light patterns dulled with pain. "I can keep going," Yuna insisted when Hana suggested they stop. "You're bleeding internally," Minji said. "You need proper medical care. We all need things we can't have. I'll hold together until we reach the archives." They pressed on. 4 people now instead of 6, all carrying wounds visible and invisible. The landscape changed as they moved north, becoming colder and more desolate. The purple vegetation gave way to ice and stone, and the twin suns seemed weaker here, their light pale and distant. On the 8th day of travel, they finally saw it, the Genesis Archives. The facility was massive, built into the side of a mountain and extending deep underground. It had been one of the greatest achievements of pre-Silence Velith civilization, a research complex dedicated to understanding and manipulating the genetic code itself. Now it stood abandoned, covered in ice and snow, dark and silent. "This is it," Dr. Minji said, awe in her voice. "Everything we need is inside." "If it still works," Dayun cautioned. "This place has been abandoned for over a century." "It'll work," Minji said confidently. "Velith engineering is built to last. The systems will be dormant but functional." They approached carefully, watching for threats. The archives had a small landing pad, frozen but intact. Dayun set the transport down gently, and they disembarked into air so cold it burned Jiho's lungs. "Northcrest forces will have tracked us here," Yuna said, checking her weapons despite her injury. "We'll have maybe a few hours before they arrive in force. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." The archives entrance was sealed behind thick doors, but Minji had access codes from old databases. The doors groaned as they opened for the first time in decades, revealing darkness beyond. They moved through corridors lit only by their flashlights, seeing a facility frozen in time. Equipment sat waiting, covered in dust but undamaged. Labs held experiments stopped mid-process when the last scientist died or left. It was a tomb for a golden age that had ended with the silence. "The main genetic engineering lab is at the lowest level," Minji said, consulting a map on her device. "That's where we need to go." They descended through the facility and Jiho felt the weight of the mountain above them. This place had been built to unlock the secrets of life itself, and now it might hold the key to preventing an entire species' death. The main lab was enormous, filled with equipment that looked advanced even to Jiho's eyes. Massive computers, genetic sequencers, synthesis chambers, all waiting silently in the dark. Minji moved among the equipment like she was in a dream. "This is it. This is everything we need. With these systems, I can run simulations that would take decades elsewhere. I can synthesize the cure sequences and test them immediately." "How long?" Jiho asked. "If everything works, maybe 6 hours. I'll need continuous genetic samples from you, fresh tissue to compare against the Velith baseline." "Then let's start." While Minji worked to power up the systems, Yuna and Dayun fortified the entrance. They set up the few defensive weapons they had, prepared barricades, and tried to find tactical advantages in the facility's layout. "This is a bad position," Yuna admitted, wincing as her wound pulled. "We're at the bottom of a mountain with only one way out. When Northcrest arrives, we'll be trapped. Can we hold them off for 6 hours?" Hana asked. "Maybe, if we're lucky and they don't bring heavy weapons." She looked at her small team. This is probably a one-way trip for some of us. Then we make it count, Dayun said quietly. The archive systems came online slowly, old computers waking from century-long sleep. Lights flickered on throughout the facility, and the hum of power filled the air. Minji interfaced with the genetic sequencer and began uploading the data she'd collected on Jiho's DNA. The systems are running diagnostics, she said. Everything checks out. This is actually going to work. Jiho sat in a medical chair while Minji attached sensors and collection devices to him. She'd need continuous samples over the next hours, monitoring how his cells responded to various stimuli while she compared them to Velith genetic patterns. This won't be comfortable, she warned. I didn't come this far for comfort. Jiho replied. The work began. Minji ran simulation after simulation, testing theoretical cure sequences against both human and Velith DNA models. The supercomputers processed data at incredible speeds, showing results in minutes that would have taken months on lesser systems. I'm seeing the patterns, Minji said, her light patterns flickering excited yellow. Your genetic defenses against plague-type damage are more robust than I thought. If I can adapt these 3 key sequences to Velith biology, the cure should work. Should? Hana asked. Science is never certain, but I'm as confident as I can be without live testing. 2 hours into the work, alarms sounded. Northcrest forces had arrived. Yuna pulled up security feeds showing the exterior. Military vehicles surrounded the archives and soldiers were preparing to enter. There had to be hundreds of them, all heavily armed. They're not taking chances, Yuna observed. That's an overwhelming force. A voice echoed through the facility's speaker system. Attention, unidentified team in the Genesis archives. This is Commander Kyung of Northcrest Military Forces. You are in violation of territorial law. Surrender the human immediately and you will not be harmed. Yuna activated the response system. This is Commander Yuna, Havenport Security. The human is here voluntarily, working to develop a cure for the silence. Give us 6 hours to complete the work. Unacceptable. The human is too valuable to leave in unsecured hands. Stand down or we will take him by force. Come try it, Yuna said, and cut the communication. The assault began minutes later. Northcrest soldiers entered the archives through multiple access points, moving with military precision. Yuna and Dayun fought them from prepared positions, using the facility's layout to their advantage, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Below, in the genetic lab, Jiho could hear the sounds of fighting echoing through corridors. Minji kept working, her hands steady despite the chaos. How much longer? He asked. 4 more hours. Maybe 3 if I skip some verification steps. The fighting won't last that long. Then we work until we can't. Hana moved to the lab's entrance, holding a weapon she clearly didn't know how to use properly. I'll buy you as much time as I can. Hana, you're not a soldier, Jiho said. No. But I'm someone who refuses to watch my species die without fighting. Her light patterns were determined blue. Finish the work, Jiho. Make this mean something. The battle raged through the facility. Yuna, despite her injuries, fought with a skill that held back the Northcrest forces far longer than should have been possible. Dune covered her flanks. The cure and the choice Jiho stood up from the medical chair, sensors still attached to his body, and faced Commander Kyung. The Northcrest commander's light patterns flickered uncertain yellow as she saw something in his expression that made her hesitate. You want me to come with you, Jiho said. You want to lock me up in your facility, study me for as long as it takes, use me however you need to save your species. You're willing to kill everyone in this room to make that happen. If necessary, Kyung agreed. One human's freedom is meaningless against species extinction. You're right, Jiho said, and everyone stared at him. My freedom doesn't matter compared to saving billions of lives. But here's what you're missing, Commander. You don't need me alive. He moved to the computer terminal before anyone could stop him, pulling up the data Minji had been working on. Dr. Minji has isolated the genetic sequences that can cure the silence. They're here in this system, ready to be synthesized and distributed. You don't need to capture me or transport me or keep me prisoner for years. The synthesis requires fresh human tissue samples, Kyung said. Ongoing access to your genetic material to produce the necessary enzymes. It required that, Minji corrected quietly, understanding what Jiho was planning. But if we complete the full genetic mapping now, We could theoretically synthesize the enzymes artificially. It would take longer, be more complex, but it's possible. How much longer? Kyung demanded. Years instead of months. But it would work eventually, and it wouldn't require keeping Captain Kim here. Jiho nodded. So here's my offer. I undergo complete genetic mapping right now. Every cell, every chromosome, every biological system that might be relevant. It'll be painful and probably dangerous, but it gives you everything you need to cure the silence without making me your prisoner. That level of mapping could kill you, Hana said, her light patterns flickering terrified orange. The scanning process at that intensity for that duration, it's not meant for living subjects. I know, Jiho said. But people have already died getting us here. Your team, North Crest soldiers, desperate civilians across this planet. How many more will die if this war over me continues? How many more settlements will collapse while everyone fights over one human male? He looked at each of them in turn. Yuna, bleeding and barely conscious but still defiant. Minji, brilliant and desperate to save her species. Hana, whose light patterns showed emotions she'd never felt before meeting him. And Kyung, the enemy commander who was just trying to save her people by any means necessary. I came here to help, Jiho continued. Let me actually do that. Complete the mapping, transmit the data to every settlement on the planet simultaneously so nobody can monopolize it, and then I leave. The Velith get their cure and I get my freedom. Everyone wins. Except possibly you, Kyung said. If the mapping process kills you, then I die helping save a species from extinction. There are worse ways to go. Minji pulled up specifications on the full genetic mapping system. It would take 3 hours of continuous scanning at maximum intensity. The radiation exposure alone could cause severe cellular damage. The pain would be extreme, and there's maybe a 60% chance of survival. I've had worse odds, Jiho said, though he wasn't sure that was true. There's another problem, Minji continued. The mapping produces massive amounts of data. To transmit it planet-wide simultaneously, we'd need to access the archive's main communication array. That's in the upper levels, currently controlled by North Crest forces. Kyung considered for a long moment. Her light patterns shifted through complex colors as she thought. Finally, she made a decision. If you're willing to do this, to sacrifice yourself potentially for our species, then I will help you. We'll secure the communication array and prepare it for planet-wide transmission. When the mapping is complete, every settlement gets the cure data at the same time. No monopolies, no wars over access. She looked at her soldiers. Stand down. These people are no longer our enemies, Commander, one of the soldiers questioned. That's an order. We came here to save our species, not to fight over one human. If Captain Kim offers us a better path, we take it. The tension in the room shifted. Weapons lowered. Yuna slumped against the wall as the adrenaline left her system, and medics rushed to treat her wounds. Hana moved to Jiho's side, her light patterns cycling through emotions too complex to name. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I do. This is why I came here, Hana, to help. Let me actually do that. You came here because you crashed. You didn't ask for any of this, no, but I'm here anyway. And I can make a difference. How many people get that chance? Dr. Minji prepared the genetic mapping system, while Northcrest engineers worked to repair and prepare the communication array. The equipment was old but functional, built to last by a civilization that had understood the value of permanent things. The scanning process will map every genetic marker in your body, Minji explained, as she calibrated the system. It'll analyze cellular function, repair mechanisms, immune responses, everything. The data will show us exactly how human biology resists the type of genetic damage that caused the silence. And that's enough to create a cure? Combined with what we know about Velith genetics, yes. It'll take years to implement, to test, to refine, but it will work. The first generation of treated Velith children will have viable males again. Our species will survive. Jiho lay back in the scanning chamber, a coffin-sized tube lined with sensors and emitters. Through the transparent top, he could see the ceiling of the ancient laboratory and the faces of people who'd become friends despite everything. 3 hours, Minji said. Don't move. Try not to scream too much. The scanning process needs you to remain as still as possible. Your bedside manner needs work, Jiho said, trying to smile. I'm a geneticist, not a doctor. Ready? No. Do it anyway. The machine activated and Jiho understood what real pain felt like. The scanners didn't just observe, they probed, penetrating every cell in his body with radiation and energy. It felt like being burned from the inside, like every nerve was screaming simultaneously. Minji had been right about the pain being extreme. She'd understated it dramatically. Jiho clenched his teeth and tried to stay still while the machine tore him apart at a molecular level and rebuilt him in data. Minutes felt like hours. His vision went white, then dark, then strange colors that didn't exist. He could hear his own heart beating, could feel blood moving through veins, could sense each individual cell struggling to repair damage as fast as the scanners caused it. Through the pain, he heard voices. Hana talking to him, reading poetry from ancient Velith literature, her voice steady despite the fear in her light patterns. Yuna, recovered enough to stand, describing military victories and tactical brilliance to keep his mind focused on something other than agony. Minji calling out progress percentages, each number a small victory toward survival. And through the transparent top of the scanner, he saw Velith faces watching him. Not just his team, but Northcrest soldiers who'd come to fight and stayed to witness. They watched him suffer for their species, and their light patterns showed emotions they hadn't felt in a century. Hope mixed with gratitude, mixed with guilt. An hour passed. Then 2. Jiho's body was breaking down from the radiation exposure, but the mapping continued. Minji adjusted parameters constantly, trying to balance complete data collection with keeping him alive. Almost there, she said at the 2.5-hour mark. Just 30 more minutes. Stay with us, Jiho. He tried to respond but couldn't form words. Pain had reduced him to something primal. Just consciousness and suffering and stubborn determination not to quit. People had died to get him here. Daeun, Yaren, countless others across the planet. He would not let their deaths be meaningless. The final minutes were the worst. The scanners went deeper, analyzing structures at the atomic level, mapping quantum states of cellular machinery. Jiho felt his grip on consciousness slipping, felt his body surrendering to the damage. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The scanners powered down. The pain faded to mere agony instead of torture. The chamber opened and hands pulled him out gently. He collapsed on the floor, shaking and barely conscious but alive. "We got it," Minji said, her voice filled with wonder. "Complete genetic mapping. Everything we need. The cure is here. Transmission array ready," a Northcrest engineer reported. Standing by to broadcast planet-wide. Commander Kyung moved to the communication controls. "This goes to every settlement simultaneously. No delays, no priority access. Everyone gets the cure data at once." She looked at Jiho, who was being treated by medics, his body covered in radiation burns but breathing. "Because one human taught us that some things are more important than politics." She initiated the transmission. Across the planet, Velith Prime, in every settlement, city, village, and outpost, computer systems received the massive data package simultaneously. The complete genetic mapping of a human male, analyzed and translated into a cure for the silence. Instructions for synthesizing the treatment, implementing it, testing it. Everything needed to restore male viability to the Velith species. It would take years, maybe a generation, but it would work. The Velith were no longer dying. In the Genesis archives, exhausted people celebrated quietly. Yuna actually smiled.